What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to Salty Runback, to be your weekly intake of North American Developmental League of Legends. It was a nice couple of weeks off, but we're back here once again because, unfortunately, there is some pressing issues that we have to discuss. My name is Grapes. I'm joined by Hawk once again. I'm in a new location. I've moved back home for the summer. We'll be filling up these walls in a little bit, but Hawk, how are you doing?
You know, Grapes, it's been an interesting few days because on one hand, I'm almost graduating from college and I'm very excited. On the other hand, North American League of Legends is fucking dying. Like, what's happening?
Yeah, you picked a great time to exit school and enter the job market. Everything's booming right now, clearly.
I know, it's really great. I'm so excited. So yeah, it's been a bit of an up and down. Like, every time I'm not checking Twitter, I'm in a good mood, and then I look at Twitter and I want to die. Like, that's kind of how it's been.
We're going to get into that a little bit later, but first of all, we just want to again thank you all for sticking with us for this split. We still plan on, of course, running the show despite all of the news, and we'll be covering the developmentals landscape, whatever it ends up looking like in the near future. We don't have a ton of details on things. We'd like to do like a team preview like series where we go through each team, but we don't know which teams are going to be in the league just yet, so we can't really do that for now. But other than that, if you have any ideas for other content that you want us to do, you can leave it in the comments, send us some stuff on Twitter. But we're gonna keep it the first part of the show a little bit more like old times. You know, good way to cope is to get back into some of the old ways, right?
Of course. Yeah, we're here to stay. We're still going to answer our questions. We're still going to cover all the developmental, like Grape said, whatever it ends up looking like. And we're confident that we can at least bring content that people are going to be happy with. At least we hope. So
I just noticed you named our title The Funeral, and you know we'll get there. But let's start off here with our headlines portion. Let's not waste any more time. We're going to keep things upbeat, at least for a little bit, because we get to talk about CLOL. That's another
good stuff
part
happening
about League of Legends that happened. Yes, top 4 is going to be happening in Los Angeles at the Riot Games Arena in just a couple of weeks, and all 4 of the teams that are going to be going over there, Hawk, are the first seeds from the selection committee. There was a lot of drama about how the committee ended up functioning, but were they really based at the end of it all?
Okay, I think this is such a funny question because we're mostly asking this because of what Grape said with the 1 seeds being the 4 teams remaining. Here's what I'll say. I think the committee got this one right, but I don't think this is like, oh, the committee is so based. I think this was like a slam dunk. I think if Winthrop, SLU, Maryville, and UST weren't the 1 seeds, I would have thought someone was off their rocker. So that's sort of my take on this. I mean, clearly they got it right. Good job to the committee. By and large, I will say, it seems that things were seeded relatively well. You know, you could argue some teams should have been up and down a spot or two. The East actually was kind of bad. Like, you know, there's like some things here and there, but by and large, right, it actually seems like the committee got a lot of stuff right. So I'll say they're somewhat based, but as far as the 1 seeds at least, like this, I think this was the most obvious top 4, and so now they are here as the most obvious top 4. There were no upsets.
Yeah, I think going into the season, or going into like the portion where like the committee was going to actually seed these teams, I thought that there was like a pretty clear top 5 or so. That would have been Maryville, UST, SLU, Winthrop, and then Fisher. But
yeah, there's an argument to be had for Fisher.
I think if Fisher got seeded into like a different place where they were playing against SLU instead of UST, they couldn't play against Winthrop, I don't think, because they're in the same conference. Maybe like that could have been a bit flip-floppy, but overall, I do think that the committee got this pretty correct. And yeah, I think for the most part, that's what happens when you have like a big group of people making these decisions. Some of the people will overestimate some teams, some will underestimate some teams. I do think like from 3 down to 8, like the kind of the lower seeds like could have been a little bit questionable for them, but I think for the most part, overall, CLOL went pretty as expected, and I think that was not maybe what people were expecting.
Yeah, honestly, I think the biggest criticism could maybe be drawn to the teams that the committee actually voted into the tournament. Like, for example, Ohio State, like maybe a little questionable, right? But I think by and large, like the seeding was good. I don't think too many teams got snubbed or anything. And I think especially looking across the board, I don't think anyone like lost because of their seeding, except for maybe Fisher, but they were like the 5 seed. So I don't know. What are you going to do? It's tough.
And the other,
and they still made top 8. So
there's also the argument about Do you have to put these like conference rankings into account? Because if, for example, ISU like might have wanted to make a bit of a deeper run, but because they had to forfeit their first round of the playoffs, they had to be
Right.
seated below every single other North team, which caused some issues. That I think is like the biggest thing that like might have caused a couple of issues. But I mean, overall, we have the best teams in the top four. I think we can pretty definitively say. And so overall, I'm pretty happy with how things ended up going. But
I do want to comment.
yeah.
Sorry, real quick. I want to comment on the whole. You have to be seated lower than teams. I think it's good because it removes a lot of speculativeness. Like for example, you mentioned ISU. Like we have no idea how good they would have been because they did FF. So I think it actually makes sense that they had to be seated lower than all the North Conference teams. But it did lead to some weird situations. Again, if we're talking about Fisher, Ole Miss. Ole Miss had to be seated higher than Fisher, or even with them, which is maybe part of the reason Fisher was a 2 seed. It could be argued. And I think SLU was pretty deserving, so I personally, I don't have an issue with that, but that definitely did lead to some interesting situations. Like, Northwood also ended up being a 3 seed, I think. Could have been argued they would have been over Ole Miss as well. So, there's some weird stuff there, but I do think it, kind of makes sense. But, and generally, again, I think the committee, at the end of the day, did a pretty good job, at least with the top teams.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to watch that top four because honestly, so far there haven't been too many super competitive matches. I think overall things have gone pretty stock standard for the most part throughout the tournament so far. And that kind of leads us into our next question here because while we do say that there's a top four, it kind of also feels like that there's kind of a top two as well. Maryville, UST, these have been the two highest regarded collegiate teams for basically the last 2 years. They're on opposite sides of the bracket. Are we just destined to see them match up here in the finals, or is there a world where Winthrop or SLU end up in that championship round?
So, Grapes, if you go back to our last episode and check the receipts, I said I think there's only 2 teams that can win this entire tournament. I didn't believe in this top 5. I believed in the top 2, and that was Maryville and the University of St. Thomas. I still believe that. I think these are the only teams that could win this tournament. I think it's unlucky for Winthrop that they're on Maryville side of the bracket as well, is what I'll say. I think Winthrop could maybe take down St. Thomas. They have showed a bit of weakness. They dropped the game to Fisher College, and in general, that series was not as convincing as I think they hoped for. Not nearly as convincing, for example, as their finals win last year. So, I think Maryville's the favorite. I think UST will be able to take care of St. Louis, but I mean, regardless, I think this is our destiny, Grapes. I think it's going to be, a lot of people thought this was the real finals last year.
Yeah.
And it's coming. It's coming.
And I was just about to say, I'm glad that they are on opposite sides of the bracket this time, so we just don't have to have that conversation, and it can just be what we think are probably the two best teams, lined up for a finals against each other. I do think that Maryville versus Winthrop is going to be pretty one-sided. I think we've seen that historically, and also here we saw it in quarterfinals last year, and we also saw it throughout the NACL in 2023.
You say overall, historically, Grapes. What happened in 2021?
There were. What was it?
Last time these two teams met in the top 4, it did not go well for Maryville.
I think it was 3 of the same players overall across both the teams. So
You're right. You are right.
Relax a little bit here.
But it is funny when you say historically. Historically,
right.
Winthrop has...
Right. Last year,
it
was a 3-0,
I'm just
2-0. And then in the NACL system this year, Winthrop did not look nearly as good as Maryville. The one actually matchup that I think it could be a little bit interesting is UST versus SLU. I think St. Louis is a very unknown quantity because they haven't really had the time to get together and scrim all that much. Given that 3 of their 5 players were on NACL teams throughout the entire year. And so now that NACL is over, maybe forever, and these 5 players get the chance to maybe scrim together for 3 or 4 weeks at a time, I do think the quality of players that they have, whether that be Winnie, Aaron, Skytech, and even the solo laners in Vital and Strumpus, that can match up player-wise to UST. And obviously UST has had a lot of experience playing together, but I think that could actually be an interesting one.
Yeah, and I do believe that top 4 is being played on 13.9, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
we're not going to be on the midseason patch. I could be wrong, but that is my assumption, is that we're going to be on 13.9 for top 4. Maybe someone can correct me if they know. But looking at such a bot-focused meta, Aaron Skytech against Shogo and Dapshin is going to be a very electrifying matchup for sure. And Winnie against Dardoch as well. Like that is definitely. I think that'll be an exciting matchup. Also, Salou, they were the other team that didn't have a convincing round of 8 series, very competitive against Northwood, a team that looked a lot better than they had in the rest of the season. So I think that I agree with you, Grapes. I think that'll be a great matchup. I do think Winthrop is not a team to be slept on. However, the problem is they're against Maryville.
Yep.
That's the way I see that one.
I mean, the team Maryville's literally in NACL as a full roster. So also,
Yeah.
last thing on CLOL. You mentioned bot lanes. Like, there's Scary Jerry and Mobility on the other side of the bracket.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
in an ADC focused meta, like this is gonna be a fun tournament. I'm pretty excited for it.
how crazy is the meta when this is not Flame, because I hold all 4 of these players in extremely high regard. How crazy is this CLOL tournament? How good are these top 4 teams when I think that Mobility and Chookies is actually the worst bot lane out of the 4? Like, how crazy is that? You know what I mean?
Did Chookies play for them in
Yeah. He's been playing since round of 16.
Okay,
he's in.
wow.
Chookies is in. So, but like, how crazy is that? Like, that just goes to show, like, these are some insane bot lanes and some insane fucking teams. Like I know we're saying it's gonna be Maryville UST, but I'm expecting some high competition though, and I think it'll be exciting.
Yeah, should be a good time. You can catch that June 3rd and 4th, and then I think 6th or 7th. Like, the schedule's weird, but it's
okay.
throughout that weekend.
It's June 3rd and 4th at the semis. June 6th is the finals, so don't miss it.
Thank you, Hawk, for clarification.
Yeah.
Should be a good time. Let's move on to our next question here, which is about, we're shifting gears a little bit towards MSI because, Cloud9 recently did get eliminated, but as well as Golden Guardians. But there is a player, EMENES, who we saw at the beginning of the year in NACL make his way all the way to playing against Chovy in a best of 5. Is this, Hawk, the most successful mid-season promotion from Academy/Challengers to the LCS of all time? Because remember, it was halfway through the season that MNS got plugged in.
It is. I think this is one of them.
We're gonna do some history here.
I think this is the second most successful promotion. Look, MNS. I'll answer this question in a minute. Let me talk about MNS first, and I'm gonna drop my bomb. Because I've got an ace in the hole for this one. I don't think it's MNS. However, to talk about MNS, he has been absolutely incredible. I mean, clearly has turned over a new leaf with Cloud9, has meshed well with the team. And while individual performances have at times been suspect, I think a huge takeaway from MNS is he's been willing to play a lot of different things, a lot of different play styles, and he's been very fearless. And he seems to have the mentality of a winner. People have been talking about how he, asked Chovy, like, how he could improve, which I do think that's, like, cool as hell, by the way. Like, I don't know. To get, like, absolutely clapped by one of the greatest mid laners of all time and be like, all right, like, how do I prevent that in the future?
How do I do better?
Yeah. So MNS has been fantastic, and I'm excited to see this player continue to grow. Him and Blabber have been a great mid jungle. I know people were critical of MNS's MSI performance. I thought MNS was still not the weakest link on Cloud9. I honestly think their mid jungle played okay, all things considered. Against the likes of Kanavi and Knight, which I guess they didn't play JDG, but you know what I mean. So yeah, MNS has been great. However, he's the second best midseason promotion of all time. Vrapes, I'll toss over the mic to you, and then maybe I can dive into this.
Okay, I first of all fully agree. I think I was a little bit disappointed we didn't see a little bit more proactivity from the rest of the team. I think MNS and Blabber did a pretty good job throughout. But it seemed like Cloud9 as a whole weren't always on the same page, and I think that's something we saw at Worlds last year, MSI this year. Hopefully we get to see better of them for upcoming international events. But now let's get into the nitty-gritty of this question a little bit, because I'm pretty excited to talk about this. Normally when you promote somebody from Academy to the LCS, it's not a good situation. Your team might be struggling a little bit. We saw this as well, this split with Tomo getting promoted halfway through over Spawn. In terms of some other potential interesting ones that we could consider here, there's of course FlyQuest subbing out their entire roster with the Academy team when they just weren't doing good at all, which maybe Dignitas could have done a little bit. TL, the Breaking Point situation in 2016 where they had like 3 different junglers, 3 different AD carries. Actually,
2016 TL doesn't exist. I just like refused. Or was it 2017 actually? Or was it both?
It was 16. It was 16. The 2 that I'm gonna mention here, and maybe you have a different one, is Contracts subbing in for Svenskeren for Evil Geniuses in 2021, which it was a pretty decent decent swaps. Contracts was kind of the big resurgence of contracts, right? You know, Svenskeren
Right.
and EG were struggling a little bit. He comes in, he's super aggressive. He pentakills TSM. They don't make worlds, but it was a pretty good run from them as a whole. And the other one I want to bring up is in 2021 as well, when Treats actually subbed in for Biofrost for a couple of weeks. Didn't end up finishing the year with them. They ended up bringing Bio back in, but I think it gave them the team a little bit more time to like recalibrate. And, hey, they won the split and went to Worlds at the end of it. We don't have to talk about what happened at Worlds, but they did win that World Championship in 2020. So I guess I could leave the floor to you now, Hawk. What do you think?
Grapes, those are some great promotions, some great memories to walk down. But I want to cast your mind back to 2018 summer. Cloud9 is sitting in 10th place, and there's a little player in Academy. There's a little player in Academy named Blabberfish2. They promote him. They make the miracle run to Worlds. Blabber doesn't play the entire season, but he was a mid-season promotion, and he's now the greatest North American jungler of all time.
You're forgetting the other one. You're forgetting that Jensen and Sneaky also got bumped down to Academy.
Okay,
and then
but
they
both
went up. That's the answer. That's the answer right there.
I still think Blabber's a better mid-season promotion. Look. I mean, okay, Jensen and Sneaky is like such a cop out, right? Because they played in the spring, and like there's the whole motivation, like Jack or Reaper to motivate the players
systems.
or whatever. But Blabber had never played in LCS, comes in and fucking smurfs it. And I mean, I know like in 2018, Blabber wasn't the superstar that we know now, so like I'm willing to concede that. That was the start of his career. I don't think there's any debate that has to be the greatest midseason promotion of all time, because if that hadn't happened, Blabber probably would have taken longer to be where he is now. And I mean, he's won like 4 titles in the last 3 years. He's, in my opinion, I think he's the greatest NA jungler of all time. And so Blabber's my pick, 2018 summer.
I'm trying to check really quickly how many games Blabber actually played at Worlds. He played
only like 1 or 2 at Worlds.
Played 1 game against Genji. He played game 3. So in terms of mid-season promotion, you know, like, how much immediate impact they had.
But Blabber played. Okay, so here's what Blabber did. He comes in, played the rest of regular season and playoffs, got Cloud9 enough championship points to get into the gauntlet, and then got subbed out in game 4 against TSM in an elimination match. For
Svenskeren and Golden
For Svenskeren.
Right?
Yeah, for Svenskeren.
That's when they were running. That's when they were running the Swole Bros. Yeah.
And because it was Jensen Blabber up until that point, so he got them pretty far, even though like at the very end he didn't play as much.
You know, I'll give you that. I gave out Treats as a potential answer. I can give you Blabber here.
Yeah.
All right, nice.
And I'm also just a huge Blabber fan, so
they made World Semis as well, so that actually worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our next topic here, though. It's a nice trip down memory lane, but we might have to do that again when we talk about some of these next players here, because Tenacity announced that he will not be a part of 100 Thieves. It's actually his decision to leave the organization and pursue content creation. And Luger and Poome also, people that kind of came through the Academy ecosystem. All 3 of these players were on 100 Thieves Academy in 2021, and it's kind of sad to see all 3 of them not be a part of the league anymore. And I think this is less a discussion of like why they're not in the league, and we can get into that a little bit. And this is more, just giving our respects to these players, because they're not going to have a spot, it seems, in the LCS for this split. And then, of course, we know how hard it is to come back after that. But I feel like there's a lot left on the table for these players, and it's a little bit unfortunate to see them out so quickly.
Yeah, it is. There's my salute to the players. I'll talk about Tenacity first, because I do think this is the bigger story. Look, I don't blame Tenacity at all, honestly. Like, he's built a pretty good brand. I don't blame him for just saying, hey, I think content creation's for me. But that being said, I mean, this is, I think, one of the biggest NA developmental travesties that we've seen in a while. With 100 Thieves keeping him in an Academy contract jail for a long time. He's one of the most hype top lane prospects ever in the history of the region. He plays 1 split, admittedly doesn't play very well, and then gets benched for someday, and that's it. Like, I mean, that's terrible. Like, I remember back in like 2021 when 100 Thieves was at Worlds, this guy was like fucking like top of the ladder in solo queue in like Korea or whatever. Like, super hype. I mean, definitely a huge what could have been story. And I again, like, I don't blame Tenacity at all, but it is just really disappointing that this is what it has come to.
I am very shocked and also just kind of angry about this whole situation, specifically for Tenacity, because if we think back to 2020, it was Tenacity, Kenvi, like those were, and Jan as well, and Copy,
Right.
and
Yeah.
Poome, and like all these players, like these were like the future of NA. This is what got me actually into the NA developmental ecosystem when I was watching some streams, and I came across this 100 Next roster that was like just winning everything as these like young players are going to be the future stars of the LCS. Only Kenvi is still in the league from this 2021 Academy iteration. Of course, Jan is on Team Liquid right now, but
Yeah.
I think also, like, you think about it, like Tenacity probably would have had an LCS spot in 2021 summer, in 2022 spring, in 2022 summer, but 100 Thieves repeatedly kind of just never gave him that opportunity, whether that was not promoting him or just by not like allowing other teams to pick him up, because buyout might have been a little bit high. Maybe Tenacity decided he wanted to stay with 100 Thieves as a whole, but just the thought of having a player like this stuck underneath somebody like Someday, which of course Someday's an incredible player, and you have Sniper kind of behind him as well, so that was like a weird thing. Just the fact, like, I think, of course, Tenacity getting promoted this spring was like, it absolutely made sense for 100 Thieves, but the fact that you give up on him after forcing him to play weak side for the entire split, which of course is not what he came up doing. Of course, he was a carry player the entirety of his career, and he's working on weak side on playing these tanks and stuff. But obviously, like, I think he was probably like a middle of the pack LCS top laner, and then I think the EG blow up actually does have a lot to do with this as well, because Someday comes back probably at a much cheaper deal, and in the case of Luger and Poome as well, FBI kind of just becomes available, and if you're NRG, you want to make a bit of a splash, maybe you can go there. I don't think Luger and Poome were a weak part of NRG at all, or CLG. I think actually like they were a strong point at times, and so I'm a little bit sad to see them go. But just overall, I am grateful for them, and also Copy, who I think we can stick in here as well, as he announced that he's going to be stepping away from competitive league as well in entirety. Just a bit of a thank you, and again a salute for all the good memories and the great experiences that I had, and I'm sure thousands of others had from watching them.
Yeah, to say one more thing about Tenacity before I talk about Luger and Poome, also Copy applies to this. Like, this is a really interesting conversation a lot of times about, like, when is a player LCS ready? People always say, oh, they need another split to develop it in Challengers or whatever. Like, I know, for example, there was a big conversation surrounding that with Soul last year when he played on TSM, and the LCS actually looked kind of good, but it's like, oh, he still needs more time to develop. Which is always such an interesting conversation, because I definitely think for players like Tenacity and Copy, they had way too long to develop. Like, they were ready, and no one gave him a chance. It's fucking stupid, personally. And I don't blame either of them for stepping away, but like, I mean, I get it. If a player looks really raw and you want to mold them, but when a player is sitting in academy at the top of their top three, if a player is top three in their role in academy for more than like 2 years, like that,
and they haven't gotten a chance, you know?
Yeah. What are we doing? Yeah, if they've gotten a chance and then they come back, like, I get it, but so that's my take on that. To talk about Luger and Poome, also, I mean, their situation sucks as well. I do think they've been given a fair shake in the LCS for what that's worth. I think they're actually very good. I think Luger's great in particular.
Yeah.
But the problem is, like, after getting cut by NRG, I don't think they're good enough to where another team is going to want to snap them up. And now with the NACL being, like, kind of a little bit wishy-washy right now, like, where the fuck are they going to go? Like, are Luger and Poome just going to be, like, the starting bot lane for, like, the DK crew? You know what I mean? Like that's
some verses for them.
Yeah, that's the problem that I see for them, because I think this is a really, really great bot lane, but we just don't really know what there is beneath the LCS. And when I think they are admittedly a borderline LCS bot lane, they're definitely not the worst, but they're not the best either. It's definitely an interesting position for them to be in.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I don't know what their plans will be. Maybe Luger goes back to Turkey or Poome. I don't know. We'll see. They haven't announced anything yet officially.
Yeah, nothing's come out, but
the decisions have been made, and we got a little bit too doomer here in the headline section, Hawk, I have to say. We were supposed to be happy, so let's get it.
I mean, it's like a question about, like, fan favorite players, like, stepping away. Like, God, it sucks.
Right, we could get into one little last bit of optimism or happiness before we go into our second portion of the show. It's off season right now. Hawk, as you mentioned, you graduate tomorrow, which is
tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe today, depending on when we upload this video. But we have a couple of weeks before the split starts up again for summer. Maybe more, because we don't really know when the league actually will be getting underway. But is there any hobbies anything that you're looking forward to doing when you get let out of school, get a couple of weeks to yourself?
I am looking forward to not having homework and having some more time. God, this sounds so stupid. I'm actually looking forward to having a little bit more time to watch some League of Legends for a bit. But also like I've also already got like some fun things planned. Like my friends and I are going to Cedar Point like next week,
Nice.
up in Ohio, and I've got another fun vacation on the horizon. And I've got yeah, that's about it. I'll be watching some legal. I'll be taking a much needed break. Is what I'll be doing.
Nice, yeah. Honestly, that is the most important thing. That you're just staying rested and getting ready for whatever is to come in the summer split. I don't know. I've been playing some golf actually.
Oh, really?
Not to sound
Okay.
too much like another podcast that talks about any League of Legends, but that is something that my grandpa likes doing a lot, and so I'll go out to the range
Nice.
with him every once in a while. My friends have started to get into it. I'm still really terrible, but we're getting there.
I
and
am exceedingly below mid at golf. Like not awful, but not good.
Hey, well, maybe if next time we get to meet up in person, we'll go.
True,
head
yeah.
to the links or something.
we gotta find a way that the three of us, you and me, could bring Cubby, and we have a
Right.
We have a
Oh my
Cubby
God,
X
the
Grapes
full-
X
yeah. Well,
X
Cubby's
Hawk golf
definitely-
round.
Cubby's
Cubby could
definitely way better
absolutely
than us.
trash both of us.
Yeah, we can maybe like scramble against him or something. That could,
Right,
that
yeah,
could that could be fair, maybe, or not. I don't really know.
Cubby, if you're down to play golf next time one of us is in town with the other,
Which who knows when that's gonna happen? But
who knows?
I mean,
Who knows?
That's gonna do it for our headlines for this week. Yeah, it's kind of like our off-season episode, but then we got to talk about like the fact that the off-season might last a little bit longer in part 2. So that's what we're gonna do. We'll see you then. We've been beating around the bush for it for a while, but it's time to talk about the decision making behind the NACL's plans for 2023 summer. We're both wearing black because it seems like a little bit of a sad day, a grieving day, a grieving week here for us in the NA developmental scene. But as we alluded to a couple of weeks ago on the last episode that we did, it was officially announced that all 10 teams requested to Riot that NACL Challenger teams become optional for the summer split, and Riot said yes. And so from then on out, it's been a whole spree of people kind of being given the notice that, hey, we're not going to run the NACL team anymore, and so you are not going to be on our team. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of LFT posts that I was not expecting to see coming into this year, and just an overall kind of negative feel to how things were going, which is really sad because I feel like overall, of course, there were things that could have been worked on, but the NACL system felt like it was a success for the most part for the spring split, and to see it all kind of crumble before our very eyes, it just feels a little bit unfortunate.
Yeah, it does. And I'll already start off the conversation with a take. I think this is an insane decision to make with so little forethought and time in the middle of the season like this. This is just a crazy decision to make and to follow through with. Because I definitely, there's a lot of negatives to come from this. I do genuinely believe, like, in the long run, this could be a positive change. I know, positivity right now is hard to come by, and with a good reason. There's a lot of valid criticism being thrown around. Think there are ways that this could work, but this is a change that I think needed to be made, at least between seasons, and one that needed, I think, some planning so that there's a safety net put in place for players, so that there's a clear plan forward for the league. Maybe that does exist. I honestly don't think there is. And so I think this is a fucking insane decision that has been made. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm hoping for the best for all the players and everything. Yeah, that's what I'm going to start it off with.
In our last episode, we had a topic about this, and I was rewatching it before starting off, before coming in to record, and We were so optimistic back then. It was honestly kind of cute. It's like watching like our old
Yeah.
like childhood videos. We were
I think
saying,
I said
Yeah.
there's no way it happens for summer. Didn't I say
yeah,
those like,
we
exact
we,
words?
we said
Yeah.
a lot of the things that like we just were not expecting to happen. Like there's no way Riot decides to make this abrupt of a decision before the summer split. Like it just would cause so much chaos. Like players would be out of jobs, and there's just no way that this happens, right? And it does. And this is a move that I know the teams and the organizations have been pushing for a while, and we can see in a lot of the team announcements that a lot of these organizations, they quote, don't think that this is the NACL in its current state is a effective path to pro. And I have a couple of issues with that, and maybe we could start by talking about this. Like, sure, there are problems with things. The developmental pipeline feels like it should be working better than it does, but I think it's just as much on the orgs that are participating in it as it is on the the system that is in place. Like we spend every year talking about all these rookies and these new players that could come through academy or challengers, and new imports come in every single year from LCS teams, and some of them are great. I think like for FlyQuest specifically, like bringing in Vikla and Prince, like sure, that makes a lot of sense. You're trying to win now. You bring in these like really good Korean players in their prime. I think that's fine. There are some other decisions that like you could have just brought in some academy people. It saves you money. It just makes more sense. And I don't know. I think overall, like the fact that these teams are saying like this is not a good path to pro and we need to fix things, and then don't offer a solution, and then also don't decide to invest in whatever talent that they do find, it's really sad, and it just makes me wonder like obviously like where the intentions of these organizations really lie.
And to talk just about some of the implications of this, like the direct implications that we can immediately see in like the next month. The biggest one is that all the people with the money, well, not all of them, but most of the people with the money just pulled out. And that means that there's going to be a ton of people without a job. And even if they can find like a new home, they're probably going to have no fucking money at all. That's the short of it. Just to update everyone, 7 teams are out. FlyQuest and EG are in.
We don't know about 100 Thieves yet.
And we don't. Well, I was about to say, and then we don't know
announcement.
about 100 Thieves.
But the fact that they haven't put anything out as we're recording this, 1:57 p.m. Eastern Time, Thursday, May 18th, 2023.
Yeah,
kind of signals to me that they're not in.
7 or 8 teams are out. 2 or 3 teams are in. So that is what 35 to 40 players and coaches that suddenly just lost their jobs like that. And again, whatever new home they find, like probably won't pay half of what they made, and that's probably being generous. So definitely a very tough situation for the players and the coaches. And the other big like a direct implication is now nobody has any idea what's going to happen with the NACL. We will probably get into that a little bit more later, so I'll put a pin in that conversation. But like the short of it is like all of a sudden 7 or 8 teams are gone. We're missing half the league. Who's going to fill those spots? Will anyone fill those spots? And what will that look like? How will that work? And like those are all the questions surrounding that. And it's go ahead, Graves.
I think you bring up an interesting point with the economics, and we can maybe talk about that a little bit right now. Obviously, it was a pretty like well-known thing that these challenger teams were being forced to put their players onto academy minimum salaries.
Right.
Some players got paid a little bit more. Probably someone like Sniper or Shaden, like a really high quality, highly touted prospect, might have got more than the minimum, but for the most part, it was the LA minimum salary for the year, which is I think 60K or around that, which
Something around
is a
that,
livable wage, especially considering that they are also paying for housing and food. But that's a lot of money, and it gives these people and these players the opportunity to really pursue this full time, right? When you are on Supernova or AOE, or not AOE, for another one of these like other teams that aren't getting paid as much, like you have to, you this can't necessarily, for a lot of them, some of these players don't have the privilege of having that be your full-time thing because you're not making enough money to keep yourself alive at that point. And so you don't get to put as much effort into it, and you don't get to like fully commit yourself to the pro lifestyle, which I think is a big part of the developmental landscape. Making sure that the players that we're going to be bringing up are ready to be pros. We saw that not work out necessarily well with Danny, who was part of amateur teams and was playing from home the entire time, and then coming to the LCS immediately, and obviously was not ready for some of the added pressures that being in an in-person environment might really bring. But overall, like the money is like maybe 60K is a lot of money. Of course, you compare it to other leagues, other developmental leagues like ERLs and like LCK challengers, like that's like not that's like maybe a lot, but just giving them the ability to like pursue this full time. I know there's a lot of discussions about like moving maybe challengers to Indiana or Chicago where the minimum wage is way lower and you could pay them and they still can have a living wage, but it's less money on the pros. Like I think that was something the PA put out. Just overall, like giving them the opportunity to do that, I think is the biggest like thing that is really sad, and that's why we're seeing a lot of teams, a lot of players, kind of announce that they're moving on and not pursuing this anymore because they can't continue to wait without seeing some results.
Yeah, and I'm gonna bring a crossroads to some of the conversation we've been having because that's again, like at Grapes, you just laid it out perfectly. Basically, no one can do this full time anymore unless you're still getting paid to be in person by an LCS organization, which is very few. And I say that confidently because I just think it's true. I don't think any NACL player playing for say Supernova is gonna be able to do this full time, which I mean isn't great, definitely. I'm hoping that these players can find like part-time jobs and maybe there's a world where they can make enough money to support themselves off a part-time job and what little they may make playing for a team. But it just means that they, as Grape said, won't be able to pursue it full-time and won't be able to be in person, which does matter. And to bring it to a crossroads, a lot of teams, like Grape said, have stated, like Cloud9, for example, that this is not the definitive path to pro, which is an interesting conversation because clearly there's a disconnect between what Riot considers to be the path to pro and what LCS organizations consider to be path to pro. The way I interpret statements like Cloud9's is that collegiate to them is the more definitive path to pro because Cloud9 doesn't have to pay for it, which, to play a bit of like devil's advocate, I think makes sense. Doesn't make it any less scummy to suddenly fire everybody right now. No. But I can kind of see that. I think there's an argument to be said that collegiate is a lot more sustainable. However, Riot, over the last 3 years or so since collegiate has really been put on the map, have said repeatedly that collegiate is not the definitive path to pro. It is amateur and academy/challengers. So there's a really interesting disconnect here where what Riot wanted to be the path to pro may no longer be the path to pro, and we might have to pivot towards collegiate more if that's what is going to happen. I know, for example, we just had the Winthrop Combine on Summer Stream last week, and we talked to Minui, and he was talking about how, going back to college might be the best thing for him, who, of course, he just had a great split on Fear, by the way, for anyone that doesn't know who Minui is. And he said that college might be the best thing for him so that he can get an education and still play. And that's why he was at the Winthrop Combine. So that is sort of an interesting, I think, crossroads of the conversation where basically no one can afford to do this full time more than likely anymore. So it's either someone tries to find money somewhere, which is unlikely, or players have to get another job, which is more likely, or you go to college and you play collegiate, which also could happen. But that, I do think if there's going to be a path forward that's not NACL, which we should get into that conversation later. If there's a path forward with not NACL, Riot needs to go all in on Collegiate League of Legends and really make this work. They've been doing, I think, a good job so far. Like, CLOL is good. But, as I said, Riot doesn't consider it to be the definitive path to pro. If that's the way forward, it needs to be the way forward. I know I just said a lot, but that's my...
I mean, you mentioned, like, Riot, like, putting some effort in. Like, the CLOL budget this year was nowhere near what they put in for NACL, and
not
obviously
also I'm saying this not having any numbers. It appears to be less than what they put in last year for CLOL as well. So I'm gonna throw that in there as well.
And overall, like obviously, like going from top 8 to top 4, there's only like 1 or 2 people like on the collegiate team in esports as a whole with Riot. Like, so obviously something
two.
would have to change there. Yeah,
There's
two people.
It's Tizza and John. That's I believe who the two people are. So shout out to them for doing great work. But yeah,
like I agree with a lot of the points that you have right now, but also have to push back on like that's like collegiate right now is not in a state where it can serve as path to pro.
Oh yeah, that is what I was trying to get across.
I think you made that point at the end.
If it is going to become that, it needs resources. That's right. Sorry, I should have clarified that. Collegiate in its current state, not the path to pro.
And again, it comes down to the fact that you literally announced this decision 2 fucking weeks before the season is supposed to start.
Yep.
These players, most of them, are living in LA right now because that is what was required. And, you know, now they're not able to decide to do other things, or they're really left in like a weird spot where maybe they signed a lease for like the rest of the year and they like can't move out of it, and they were expecting to be able to pay for it, now they can't. Or they wanted to like apply to a school or like really search through collegiate organizations. I know right now the CLOL teams are still scouting, but you know, missing out on that significant amount of time and having to change gears so quickly, it like definitely really sucks. And so I am really more mad at that fact. And I think kind of another thing that we can continue to talk about is like, well, actually really quickly right now, just the idea of like NACL teams like not making money, which I think overall like I can understand like where people are coming from, right? But like ERLs, like people might point to as being like a profitable like tier 2 system, and maybe that's collegiate, you know, maybe more regional based organizations throughout the country like playing together like collegiate organizations would function in a similar way to ERLs. But that's not what we have right now in the NACL, in the NA ecosystem. There's only one country. There's no language-based streams. There's no like French league, Spanish league. There's not as much national pride in that area. And I think we have to look at it more from like the perspective of minor league sports, where while there is a small revenue stream through ticket sales and things like that, those teams generally operate on a pretty significant loss. And the benefit of having these developmental programs is not to make money through them, but to have players come up that like are much cheaper. You mentioned Blabber. Blabber, I'm sure, in 2019 was very cheap for Cloud9 to bring on to be their starting jungler. I mean, and overall, like compared to what he's worth now, maybe a little bit more, but like if another free agent team like wanted to sign Blabber in free agency after 2018, they would have had to pay him way more money. And just having him on that like, you know, like rookie contract. Same with like Jojo Pion. I think Cubby's brought that up a lot. Like Jojo is way cheaper, and you're able to continue to develop him. Like that's saving the money of like an entire NACL roster for the season. And so if you use your developmental pipeline right, you'll save money in the long run, even if like the area here is operating a loss. That's what happens in all sports. That's what's happening now. And if the argument is you don't have the revenue to work with in the first place, why did we franchise at all? Like, why are we not giving other people the opportunity to develop if you are not able as an organization to fully put out like a full pipeline in that way?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things to unpack here. I have so many thoughts swirling in my head, but the biggest one is like I actually talked to Colomer about this for my documentary class final. I did one about this ecosystem. It might come out soon.
Cool.
It's not that good. I ran out of time editing it for my final, but I mean it's interesting. I hope. But anyway, I talked to Colomer about this. Every decision that's been made in esports so far is just so fucking short-sighted. Like people just think like money, like, you know, and like I get it, it's a business, and business is business. I know fuck all about business, so I'm not the best person to comment on that. But the problem is like it seems like every decision that's being made is for like the now, right? Like how can we win now? How can we make money now? And it's like, yes, while the end goal is to make money and it's a business and people need money and money makes the world go round. I get it. Like
just think for a little bit.
Right, like, exactly. Like we've required teams 5 years ago. We required teams to have academy teams when we started with franchising 5 years ago. How in 5 years could we not figure out how to actually make this useful? Sometimes it has been, right? But like it took a really fucking long time to get teams to figure out like to get a meaningful broadcast, right? Like I mean the NACL broadcast has been cooking this year. Academy last year was great, right? But for a long time there wasn't a meaningful broadcast. There wasn't, I mean, the teams were just kind of doing like whatever. And it was all in the sake of like, let's spend $5 million on perks so that Cloud9 can make quarters at Worlds. Whoop-de-doo.
Yeah.
You know, like, and so it's just all of these decisions are so short-sighted, and then it's like, why are we losing money? Well, it's because we spent a ton of money to do nothing. I don't know. It's just
it's like what maybe 500K a year to run an academy team.
Yeah.
Overall, there are definitely LCS players making more money on rosters with the organization dropping the team, right?
I want to interject real quick. I totally understand that, yes, if you want to cut costs, straight up cutting your Challengers League team does quantifiably cut costs. However, it's a weird cost to cut to me. It's so minor. If you look at these teams' finances, which I've personally not, but I've seen other people do so and tweet about it and talk about this. And honestly, maybe I should probably do some of my due diligence on that. If you look at these teams' finances, Challenger is a drop in the bucket compared to what they're spending on other shit. So, are you really valuing that other shit higher than Challenger? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we obviously, this is kind of like a therapy session.
I really
haven't figured it out.
I've gotten wound up.
But let's take a look at the teams that did decide to stay right now, right? It's Team Liquid, Evil Geniuses, and FlyQuest, right? Team Liquid, I appreciate them, going out and making a statement with Steve saying that we feel like this is unfair to our players if we don't continue to keep them here for the rest of the year. The other statements by Evil Geniuses, I felt really bad about that one. I don't know, something about what GamerDoc was saying, we need to redefine the word development, and we're gonna keep our team, but just for this split, just because we didn't feel like we gave them the right opportunity. I don't know, something about that. It just seems so doomer as a whole. Nobody really has faith in NA at all, and I don't know. I appreciate TL and FlyQuest staying around, specifically EG. We'll see how that ends up going. I of course wish well to all the players. Some other teams that didn't, decide to stay around. I think that a team like Golden Guardians, who really invested into NA developmental.
You could see that Inera was not very happy about that.
Inera was not happy. Cloud9, I kind of saw it coming, honestly, even though a lot of people were saying oh no, Cloud9's gonna keep their spot around, just because the buyout market doesn't exist anymore, and that's almost exclusively what Cloud9 has used their academy team for the entire time that they have operated one. And so financially, for them, they don't really care. But yeah, I don't know. Overall, we don't want to call teams out, but it just, things seem, even the teams that are sticking around, it doesn't seem like they really want to or care.
I think the real question that I'm waiting to be answered, and we probably don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because it would just get into a lot of speculation, is how many of the 3 remaining teams, or 4 if 100 Thieves keeps them, which probably not. So how many of the 3 remaining teams, keeps their Challengers League team next year, and what is done to help the ecosystem for next spring, for 2024 spring? Because this is probably the time maybe where we should get into what's going to happen with the NACL, this split at the league itself. Because honestly, whatever happens, it's probably going to be not what we were hoping for. It's probably going to be a bit of a wash of a split. I'm hoping it's still able to be great and we're able to love it in all the ways we always have, but it's probably not going to be, the same.
Yeah, as we said, we're going to continue our coverage throughout summer. We're going to try our best to highlight whoever does end up sticking around, because obviously we've seen a lot of people moving out to Korea, boot camping and things like that already. Yeah. So we're seeing those dominoes start to fall.
Definitely. And so based on that, we're this is probably not going to be the same NACL split. Riot, how is this ecosystem either amateur, or are we going to make a full-on pivot to CLOL and say, this is the new thing? I don't know. How are we going to prop that up? And then for the teams as well, I honestly would not be surprised if all 3 teams just drop their Challengers League team for next year, and they're just keeping them on to not totally fuck over the players, which, hey, honestly, you get a little bit of brownie points for that. Good job. That's a PR slam dunk, and you have helped some people a lot by doing that. So good job to those teams. If they drop their rosters next year, though, is there going to be a new system in place by that point? And will the time have been enough? I think that's the big question that is really going to determine what happens with this. Because, again, as we talked about, in the short term, it's just a ton of people have been screwed over, and it's horrible, and I wish I could say something more than, like, that's awful. You know what I mean? Like, but as far as looking for the future, that's it. So maybe, Grapes, we want to get into the conversation of, I guess, as far as this split, what actually happens with the league, aside from the teams and the people. What's the league going to look like? And maybe we could get into our Twitter questions if we want to, because they kind of tie into this. But
I had a great point. And I
go for it. Give me a point.
No, I just completely lost it.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It's on me. We asked a little bit around Twitter. Somebody that responded to us with messages, who's somebody big friend of the show.
Messages, shout out.
A great NA talent. But of course he's in a really weird spot now, and a lot of players are in really weird spots where the system above them, where they have been dreaming of, where their pro aspirations have been for years, is seemingly not as stable as they thought it once was. And before we get into that, I also just things were looking so good over the past couple of years, right? Like I thought that with the introduction of these amateur teams and proving grounds and this mix of people, things could have really started to do good. Obviously, that's not the case. We can get
I want to interject on that really quick, though, but I think that, again, goes back to that disconnect between Riot and the teams that we talked about earlier, though, that I brought up. Because Riot, honestly, I do want to give Riot some credit. Yeah, I don't love this decision.
I mean,
however,
they could have just said no, right, to the teams. The teams, they sent
Sorry,
their request every split. Riot says no every split. This time, they were like, no. We're going to actually keep it. But
I don't want to give them credit for this decision. I want to make that clear. However, they did a lot to really prop up amateur and academy / NACL for the last 2.5 years. I think that's fair to say. I think we can give credit there. And as you said, Grapes, it was looking really good. But I will say, I think the teams the whole time were kind of not on board with this. There are some teams that were starting amateur teams. They were really passionate about developing NA talent. But when push came to shove, how many players were actually getting promoted? You know,
there were a couple. There were a few this year, but for the most part, and those were a long time coming. People
that is my one thing where I think there was a disconnect there, and then ultimately, Riot bent the knee, which I disagree with, for sure. So, but that's just where I think that disconnect that I mentioned earlier definitely comes into play.
Yeah. I don't want to leave messages out too much to dry.
Yes,
so let's get into one of the first things that he asked was with some of the news of the NACL teams dropping and with some of the players going to Korea like Wixie, we also saw, of course, Tenacity and some other people just deciding not to play this year and planning boot camps or other things for the rest of the year. Do you think that there will even end up? Do you think that players even will want to play in NACL, and will there even be an NACL split? I was pretty certain there was going to be an NACL split a week ago. We'll see what happens now. It's going to definitely look different now that 7 teams have dropped out. I don't know what you think, Hawk.
Yeah, I think the best answer to this question, and literally the worst thing we could say to answer this question, is the answer that I have, where we don't know. We have no idea because no one knows what the plan is right now. Yeah. And I'm sure something will come out at some point. But I would, at the very least, the split's going to get delayed. It's probably not going to start at the beginning of June. That's what I can say with pretty high confidence just on speculation. Because I think the answer is that I don't know. I'm sure Riot will try to make an NACL split, but at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the players, and it's going to be up to the teams that are still around, and who knows what that's going to look like. And like I said, that's also a terrible answer to give because it's really demoralizing. We just don't know what's going to happen. So that's the answer to that. And how sad is that?
As of now, there are 9 teams that are supposedly still in for the NACL. There's the 6 teams that either made it through the promotion tournament or were in already, like Fear and Wildcard, and then of course TL, Fly, and EG.
I do want to point out. Sorry, I want to jump off that super quick. Fear and Wildcard have both blown up their rosters, for the record. So.
Have they officially?
Well, at the very least, we've heard rumors that Fear is blowing up their roster, and I saw a LFT from Duo King last night. So
there are generally LFT posts going around. I think the rosters might end up staying together because at the end of the day, the power goes to the players to retain their spot, even if the org drops them.
Right,
so they can still play as 5. Maybe the org is just letting them seek other opportunities.
Okay, so I may have been overzealous saying the rosters got blown up. However, talking to Minwi and also hearing rumors about Fear, it sounds like their roster will not be very similar heading into the next split.
Okay.
That I can say with some certainty. And again, I saw Dua King, LFT, maybe Wildcard stays together. I don't know. But like even those teams, right? Like they're also still going to be in the shuffle. I think it's fair to say, even though they have a spot, they're going to be in the shuffle. Does that sort of make sense? So,
and I think the question is,
keep in mind,
how do the rest of these orgs like fill in? Obviously, we just had a promotion tournament, and so now we have to like promote 7 new organizations into the league if we want to keep the same structure. We'll have to wait and see. In terms of like players, I can definitely understand a lot of people not being a part of the space for this split, especially if you were, on a league minimum salary, which is again like 60 grand. Like that's enough to like, get by as a pro player in Los Angeles for the year as your lone source of income. People that have like been on that for the past couple of years and have been waiting for their opportunity and just haven't found it. We saw that with Copy and I guess to an extent like Tenacity. I think some of those players are not going to be around as much, and so we'll see how everything ends up getting shaked out. But there will be opportunities for a lot of new players to enter the NACL, which I think is maybe a small positive. But it's going to be a very different landscape, I feel, for this year.
Yeah, definitely. Should we jump into messages? Other question, because I do think it's also relevant to the conversation we're having.
And I know I tweeted something saying like none of the orgs have offered any potential solutions, and I don't want to sound super, I don't know, like what's the word where you're like not whatever. I don't want to sound like contradictory to myself, so I want to talk about some potential solutions. We mentioned collegiate already. Yeah. There's been talks about like a player strike for the LCS Players Association, which frankly I don't really see happening. It's a very complicated process, and I don't know, but I think it would be cool to see some solidarity. I think the LCSPA has done a pretty good job overall, like standing up for the players and making sure that they have a voice given all this. And I've been trying my best to like retweet different people and things like that as well. But I don't know some kind of movement started up by the players to make sure that something changes, and I'm not super optimistic because I don't know if things are going to change at this point.
Yeah. We'll definitely see what happens. Again, like I said earlier, like what happens in 2024 is probably a big question, but the split's definitely going to be rough, and my heart goes out to everyone affected. I mean, honestly, like even Grapes were indirectly affected by this, maybe a bit more than some people. The talent on NACL, my heart goes out to them. I know they're our friends, and especially players and coaches. Like, I just wish I could do something more than look into the camera and say I feel you. However, maybe Grapes, we can try to do something a little bit more. Messages also asked about what the best thing to do for Challengers League players would be, and also I'll throw in like any aspiring Challengers League players, anyone in the qualifiers as well. What's the best thing to do? Messages asked, sit here and play for $0, or not play in NACL until Riot's forced to do something to do something else. I'm gonna just jump in on this, I'll answer this in multiple parts. First part is, unless you can really afford to give like a year of your time to it, do not sit and play for $0. And what I mean by that is like, if you're still in like high school or something, or you've got a part-time job, or maybe you're in a position in your life where you can afford to take a gap year. I know that people do that. Like you could justify playing for $0.
Just quickly, like a lot of the qualifier teams, Tony Top, like they did play for free basically this year, and so I think it's gonna be a very similar like case by case basis for the players. Like if you're able to and you want to, like that is maybe an option for you. And I don't think like boycotting, unless everybody is on board, necessarily does any good.
Yeah, I would say boycotting is probably not the move either, because what I'll say to that is
unless there's like a full strike from the entire Players Association, which again I don't see as super likely.
Because I could see a world where it's like, well, the players don't want to play, like the system's doomed. Like I mean, I don't know if that would happen, but what I'll say is like, unless you can afford to play for $0, like I can't offer that as advice. The advice I will give, I know I've talked about collegiate a lot. I would say collegiate looks like a great opportunity right now, or find a job. That's a terrible way of saying that, but try to go out.
McDonald's.
Sorry, that was not helpful. What I mean is, if you have career prospects, I would look towards those, and maybe push league to the side a little bit, make it a part-time thing and not a full-time. We talked about, I don't think anyone really has the money to do full-time, again, unless you could really afford to be a full-time League of Legends player and that you're in high school. Well, no, if you're in high school, you're in school, but if you're like, I'm just taking a gap year in my life or whatever, maybe this comes back, like maybe, but you need to be able to afford that. I would say have a career prospect, try to line up a career prospect that is not North American Challengers, North American League of Legends for right now. If it comes back, great. Grapes, I know you're in college. I'm about to graduate. I came into esports as a college student 2.5 years ago. And being a full-time college student while you're trying to make your way in esports is difficult. And I know that a broadcaster schedule is a lot different than a player schedule as well. And it's going to be hard. But, I mean, my current plan after graduation is to try to start, give myself some time and then try to start a career elsewhere, unless somehow League of Legends esports takes off, which, I'm not expecting it to. So
at this point,
that's my short advice is like, I would start to seriously consider other career prospects, but that doesn't mean put it away entirely. Just make yourself able to afford playing on not a full-time salary. Is that helpful in any way? I hope that came across the way I wanted it to.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, players like messages who've been on like NACLQ teams and things like that, where it's not your primary source of income. I think that's something that always has to be in your mind, and I think you just have to recalibrate your potential. Like you have to like recalibrate whatever formula you had in your mind now that like this change has been put into play, and a lot of people are going to be making a lot less money until you make it into the LCS, and that's probably that's probably like where you can really start to think of like being in a sustainable level of income, at least until like some other things change. And I think we can get to that a little bit later. The biggest piece of advice I would give to players is to build a brand for yourself, like personal brand for yourself. We've seen people like Tenacity go into content creation because he's built up this Twitter persona of being like the hot buff guy that is good at League of Legends and is funny. I like having the ability to not just be the good player. It pains me every time, like, and I know the NACL broadcasts like put a lot of effort into trying to help these pros like build their social presence a little bit on Twitter, because I think that is the most important thing. That's what's going to separate you from other people, especially now if there's not as developed of an ecosystem, and just making sure that you're super set on like your personal success, and if that comes through playing professionally, like hell yeah, like let's do that. But there's other options now that have to be considered as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's actually great. Two great sides of the coin for advice. What Grapes gives as a player, building your personal brand and making yourself stand out in some way is going to increase your prospects so incredibly much. And I know a lot of people say this in the space, but it really is important. And also, as far as like from the business perspective or whatever, right, or the life perspective, like I think at this point the writing is clear. Just like say a struggling actor, right? Like they don't do it full time. I think the same goes like League of Legends, probably not the best to do full time right now. So finding some other thing that you can do, and that's not to say shelve League of Legends entirely. We all have a dream for esports. That's why we're here. I know that you all have dreams. I know that Grapes and I have dreams, and it's possible to see them come through, but you don't want to fuck yourself by trying to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so set yourself up in the best position that you can to have a backup plan in place. And I know it's hard, and I know some of you are incredibly talented and passionate, but put in work here still. I do think there's still something here. I think in a year or two there could still be something here. It might look a lot different, but there could still be something here. But set yourself up in a position for things not working out as well. That I think is important.
and I think this kind of segues into maybe what we can close the show on a little bit, which is like what things look like down the line. Because obviously for summer, like we talk about how quickly and how abrupt this change really is, and I think it gets accentuated when we again discuss the prospect of having independent organizations in the NACL and having that be your main like way to get in. We saw, of course, before franchising that be the case, and now in ERLs like that's the case as well. But there's no incentive for these organizations currently to be in the NACL other than the fact that you really love League of Legends. We know that Supernova, AoE, these teams really love League of Legends. They're going to be here basically no matter what because they're just very passionate. But the profitability is just not there. I mean, that is why a lot of these LCS teams are mad, which, again, disagree with entirely. But if you're an NACL independent organization, that is now your main focus. And so we have to maybe shift a little bit to figuring out what can be a sustainable tier 2 landscape moving forward.
Right.
And I think the biggest thing is just creating additional revenue streams. Riot has not done a good job at that at all. You think of like in-game purchases in other games. I know like Myra quote retweeted something that like Wildcard has a deal with Rainbow Six, I think, where you can like put like logos on your like guns and stuff like that. Like if we got like a wild card emote in the game League of Legends, like, and all the proceeds from people that like buy that go to supporting the team, just like creating different ways for people to make money in the space and to make this more like ERLs and less like minor league baseball maybe. Like that is what the next steps really have to be.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say as well, maybe this, like you said, Grapes, we can wrap up the episode here, is also, if you're a player, anyone, we haven't actually talked about this, so I'm gonna blast something out, and if you don't like it, you can cut it. But if you're a player, anyone that's been affected by the changes in the NACL, I know we said build your brand. If there's any way that we could help you tell your story, blast your name out into the universe, I know it's a small boost, but if you're welcome to message us. We'd love to talk to you, and do whatever we can for you. It may be small, but maybe that's something more than me just saying I feel for you. Let us try to do something. So if you're a player, a coach,
any way that we can try to help, we would love to.
You're regardless of if you've already found a new team, you're looking for a team, you don't know what to do, let us help you, let us tell your story or not, and we can just talk to you. I don't know, whatever you want.
Yeah.
We're here.
And we're gonna continue to try to tell the stories of all you guys and building up all the players that do decide to stick around. And if you do decide to, obviously, of course, we want everybody to pursue what is best, but big respect for people that do end up trying to stick it out and make it through, because it definitely is tough right now. And we want to make sure that we can support everyone the best way that we can. And if there's any way that we can do that, we'd love to help, as Hawk said. Yeah,
like I said, we're all passionate and we all have that dream, right? So let's work together to try to keep something here. I guess. Is that cheesy? Is that too cheesy to end the episode?
So.
I don't know.
It's a good thing, but I guess that'll do it. We'll be back maybe next week, maybe whenever other things come out, and we'll have the opportunity to talk about stuff more. Again, we're planning on doing team previews before the season ends up beginning, whenever that may be. I have a good feeling it's not going to be what was originally intended, June 3rd to 4th, but we'll get more information as that comes out. We also have some other cool stuff in the next couple of weeks on the horizon, so make sure you guys keep an eye out for that. I don't know, Hawk, is there anything else that you wanna say before we close things?
No. All I want to say is I choose to believe we'll find a way through this collectively, even though times are difficult. So we'll see how things go.
Sorry, this was like such a sad episode.
It is a sad ending. I don't know, man. Like every time I've gone on Twitter for the last 3 days, I've just been sad. So we'll bounce back. We've been here for 13 years. We can bounce back. So thanks everyone. Make sure you follow us on all of our social media at Salty Runback Pod. Shoot us an email at saltyrunbackpod@gmail.com, especially if you're a player, coach, anyone else, staff member. We'd love to hear from you. Let us tell all of your stories. It's something we can do. We'll still be here. We'll still be making content. We're still going to try to brighten all your days, and maybe it'll be something that you can just take with a grain of salt, because I think we all need a little bit of that right now. I've been Hawk. That's been Grapes. Have a great night, everyone.